Let's do a little review, then we move forward. So Jesus is in Jerusalem at the temple. That's what's happening. And it's like his last journey to Jerusalem because, in a minute here he's going to die, all right? Nathan, just so you can get caught up, we've been studying Matthew for 2 years. 2 years now, okay? So that's where we are. So I'm giving you context so that everybody can be, although you probably know all this stuff, so it's all good. So we're studying Matthew. Jesus is in Jerusalem at the temple. He flipped the tables, and then the people of power, the high priests, people at the top of the food chain came out. Started, hey, what authority, what are you doing, what's going on, and everything else. And then Jesus just starts telling stories. Do you guys remember that? So 2 weeks ago, Jesus told not 2 weeks ago, as we were reading this, Jesus told the first story, which was the parable of 2 sons. You guys remember that one? Right? One son said, yes, Dad, I will go work in your vineyard. And then he does nothing. And we know that for those who are parents at home know exactly that feeling, right? Take the clothes out of the bathroom. Yes, Father. Still there, half an hour later. So anyway, and then the second son says, no, I'm not going to do what your desire, Dad. But then he goes out and does it. And the whole point of the story is, that the religion of God, the religion of Jesus, is less about, words and signs on the street and strong convictions. And it's much more about just, living life in a just and kind and merciful way as God would want us to do. That's the whole point of the law. That whole deal of law, 10 Commandments, Mount. It's all for you to live like a good person, like a good neighbor, taking care of others around you. That's why Paul goes after and just says, hey, you want to know the summary of this whole thing is love your neighbor as yourself. That is what it's all about. So good, do that. So the first son says, yes, I will do, and then he does nothing. His words were right. Yes, Father, you are so good, and I will live. But he does nothing. So words in this whole mixture here have a place, but they're not the most important thing. And we talked about how in Christian thinking and imagination these days, our religion is a lot about words and words that we believe and words that we share with other people. And what we've been learning together is that the emphasis, although, like I said, words are good, the emphasis needs to be in life and how well those words find a place in our heart. I wrote the newsletter yesterday based on the article on the paper this week about that silent obedience. I thought that was a beautiful way to put it. How faith, sometimes it doesn't come with words and great sermons. So that's why I'm always, at the edge of sinning here all the time. In the end, it's about life. It's about living according to that word, allowing the word to be made flesh inside of all of us. So that point of the first story, and Jesus telling this again at the center of religious power to people who had great words. Who had the Torah memorized, had the law, knew everything, Jason. But that were abusing others and making it hard for people to find God by their desire to control what happened in the temple. Making more rules and making it less easy for people just to experience God and life and goodness and forgiveness. Then, the week after that, we talked about the parable of the tenants in a vineyard. You guys remember that one? That one was a good one. That was last week. In fact, I have to still tape the one because we had technical problems. It's coming. I'm going to have to redo the whole thing. I thought about doing both of them twice again, but I wanted to be merciful upon you. So I have to do that later. Last week we talked about the parable of the tenants. You guys remember that one? Yes or no? Right? The owner of the vineyard, another vineyard, right? Because Jesus was always out there in the country, so he knew this and the people knew this. The owner of a vineyard planted a vineyard, built the tower, did a bunch of things so that the land could produce fruit, right? And then he leased it just to a group of people, and then he left. And then he sent servants to gather the fruit at the appropriate season, and we know the story. They kill the servants. The owner tries again. Maybe they change their mind. They didn't want to do that. So more people are killed. And then he sends his own son, which they take outside of the vineyard because that's how you do stuff. And they kill the son outside. And then Jesus turns to the high food chain power people and asks, what do you think the owner should do to the tenants who are just killing everybody. I said, oh, it's going to be a very harsh punishment, upon all of them. And I told you that story last week with a question in mind, right? You guys remember what question I asked right in the beginning? The whole story should make us think about what is the true church. This whole talk, what is the true church? And then we go into the words, into the ideas, into the doctrines, into all these things. And like I said, they're all good and fine, but in the kingdom of heaven, words are less important than life. And in the kingdom of God, Jesus tells it like it is. He says, the kingdom will be taken from you and given to a people that produce its fruit. Why? Because that danger, that risk was upon the Israelites, and it's upon us today, of thinking that we are true church without developing fruit, allowing God to do a work in us that develops fruit of the kingdom itself. So if anybody asks you, what is the true church? And before you go ahead and say, my church, just think about all of these things. The true church is with the people who produce the fruit of the kingdom. That's it. Well, what do you mean? What about our beliefs? No, our beliefs are beautiful and great, and they lead to life, hopefully. But at the end of the day, the kingdom is with those who produce its fruit. And may we be those people. Amen? All right, are we caught up now? Guess what Jesus is going to do today? Tell a third story. So he's on a roll, right? With story. So can we do another story today? And this week I read the story and I was like, this is such a meaningful, beautiful story that I'm not going to write anything down. I'm just going to read it to you guys and then we'll figure it out together. How does that sound? Scary? Okay? We'll see. We'll see how it goes. I wrote a few things on my Bible, so it's not that I didn't write anything. Ready? Matthew chapter 22. Jesus still talking to the high, powerful people, Leslie, in the top of the religious food chain who are giving people a hard time. Doesn't happen today, though. All religious people in the world are so kind. All right. That was a joke, by the way. Yeah, I know. All right. Matthew 22, 1 to 14. Ready, friends? Yes or no? Are we caught up? Anita, are we caught up? Okay, good. Am I doing a good... Anita, I was a teacher in Brazil, so you can already see my problems here, yes? I can't shake it off from me. You got to do reviews and stuff. So at least Anita gets it. All right. Chapter 22, verse 1. And again, because 2 stories weren't enough. And again, Jesus spoke to them in parables, saying, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a wedding feast to his son. This story is better known as the parable of the wedding feast, for those who've heard it before, right? It's a good one. And it's funny how Jesus is listening to the answer these guys give, and then he just puts it in the next story. You're going to see that there. Remember that in the parable of the tenants, Jesus asked the top of the food chain guys, what do you think should be done with these tenants who are being irresponsible? And they said they should be thrown in the darkness and have a horrible punishment. Jesus is going to put that into this story to make it even more difficult for these guys. They hate it. But anyway, let's go. So the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king. And you say, but Tiago, this has nothing to do with church. This is what Jesus is talking about, the kingdom of heaven. So I need to remind you again, even before we continue, that what is the connection between our church community, people gathering, and the kingdom of heaven? Does anybody know the word that puts it together? I'm going to write it up again. So kingdom, how is this connected to church? The church is a sign. In or on the earth, a visible, if we live, obviously, according to the principles of the king, because it can also be a very bad sign of other things. But the church is a sign. It's a signpost of the truth of an invisible kingdom now being visibly manifested in concrete reality. So what is the connection between church and kingdom? Well, the church lives by the principles of the kingdom of heaven, so it becomes a visible sign of that kingdom right now. Or at least it should. Right? Are we together? Yes or no? All right, let's keep going. The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a wedding feast for his son. So Jesus resurrected the son from the previous story, brought him back, and sent his servants. So the king wants to have a feast, right? And you already know who the king is in this story, right? The king is God the Father. And it's awesome, Mary, that we know from the Bible that the God of the Bible enjoys feasting. Jesus always tells stories about parties. So for those who enjoy those, that's the God of this book. Enjoys the party. And this whole story, by the way, is God not wanting the party to not happen. So God is pushing for the party. And when I say party, I don't know what reference you have in your mind, but can you smell the barbecue, the fire? Greg already smiled over there. Good. The cooler filled with nice beverages that you enjoy, refreshing in the heat. So there's a party going to happen for his son. So the king sent his servants to call those who were invited. So there was an invitation going around beforehand. So the servants went out just to gather everybody who had been invited. But they would not come, Audie. They didn't want a party. Verse 4. Again, like in the previous story, he sent other servants, and he might have been thinking, well, maybe, they forgot about the date, but I'll send more servants just to, because it's going to be a good party. I'm preparing good things. So he sends other servants saying, tell those who are invited, see, I have prepared my dinner. So he goes through the menu now. My oxen, fat calves have been slaughtered. So we are in the range of barbecuing here, Jason, by the way. Big barbecue. Everything is ready. Come to the wedding feast. You have been invited. I have prepared all things. Come and participate in the feasting, in the joy. So what happens now? Verse 5, but they paid no attention to the servants and went off, one to his farm, another to his business, while the rest seized his servants, treated them shamefully, and killed them. Wow, violent response. They were tired of the messengers. Verse 7, the king became very angry, and he sent his troops. So while the party was going on, it's a weird story, and destroyed those murderers and burned their city. So remember when the previous story they said, oh, they deserve a punishment. Jesus put the punishment in here on this story. Then he said to his servants on verse 8, the wedding feast is ready, but those invited were not worthy. Interesting. What did the people who were invited needed to do here, guys? That's it. Show up. Did they do anything? No. Did they kill an animal? No. Everything was prepared by the king. Worthiness here is not, oh, let me get ready, let me do all. No. It was just literally just going to the thing and enjoying it. So let's keep that in mind when words like worthy show up, because normally in our religious mind it's like, oh, they didn't prepare enough. They haven't. No. Let's just stop right there with our, lovely Christian legalist readings of this thing. No. The worthiness was simply tied to, oh yeah, there's a party. I'm going to go sit and eat. Maybe dance. Have fun a little. So verse 8, then he said to his servants, the wedding feast is ready, but those invited were not worthy, so let's wrap things up and just not have the party. No, verse 9, go therefore to the main roads, because we're going to have a party. Don't get me wrong. People don't want to come, that's fine. But this thing is happening, you understand? It's not tied to anybody, so he sends them to the main roads. And in order for you to understand what this means, main roads, what do you think? What do you think? It's cereals, where some of us live these days. Go over there where you know you're going to find people who are hungry, who are wanting to party, who are wanting something. Because obviously, the elite of the kingdom, those who were invited, are busy doing whatever. So just go to cereals. Is this helpful to you guys? Cereals, yeah. Go down cereals. Start at airport, because that's normally where I go, right? And then just move up. Let's keep reading. Go therefore, verse 9, to Cereals Road and invite to the wedding feast as many as you find. Let me pause right here, because I just want you to grasp what we're talking about today. Jesus already talked about what the church is, right? To who the true church, where it's located. And where is the true church that is a sign of the kingdom located? With the people who produce the fruits of the kingdom. What are the fruits of the kingdom? Kindness, faithfulness, love, mercy, justice. People who live with their heart beating like the heart of the Father, right? So far, so good. So today we're going to talk about this whole story here is very simple, Oscar. This is a story about, okay, so who are these people? That's what Jesus is going to describe. Who can be part of the church, of the kingdom, of all of these good things? That's the question. So go therefore to Cereals Road and invite as many as you find. Did the king give any criteria? Hey, go to the main road and grab those who seem like hard workers. Don't just grab anybody. Grab those who might get, that they did, because our mind, remember, you guys, we know this, right? We grow up, I know if you did, I did for sure, learning that to have dessert, you had to eat the broccoli. I revisit those moments every meal at home these days. We grow up with this merit deal, right? That if you do this, then you get that. And we plug that into religion without even thinking, right? God is not answering my prayers. I must have done something wrong. Or I'm feeling attacked by somebody, so I must have done something right. Because life is always this exchange, right, Jace? I'm working very hard at my job. I deserve a promotion. Why? Because I've done this, I get that. Well, the logic of the kingdom is really, really unfair if you're going to go that route. No criteria. Go out, bring as many as you want in. That's it. Are we together? Yes or no? Are we learning what a church looks like? Yes or no? Good. I'm glad. Makes my job way easier, Nathan, once the texts and Jesus sort of shape the conversation. All right. Verse 10. And those servants went out into the roads and gathered, not some, not many, all whom they found. And guess what? Both good and bad. Are you guys with me? Let's read that together. Both bad and good. Let's do it again. Both bad and good. So there you go. You want to know what a church looks like? Oh, well, there you go. Everybody, all, both good and bad. And this connects to what Jesus already said, that wheat and chaff grow together. It's okay. There's room at the table for everybody. No, but what if that's not your job? The what if, the what if, the whatever, not our job. Our job, make room at the table for all. Are we together, yes or no? Oh, it's good to read the Bible once in a while, isn't it, Jason? I find it very helpful. So the wedding hall was filled with guests. What a good thing. So in another temptation, it's a very Adventist temptation, is to think that this is about heaven, right? Oh, no. Let's avoid thinking about heaven for a second and just imagine this as something that is happening right now. The feast, the whole deal, right now. The invited didn't want to come, so now you go to Cereals and bring everybody in right now to participate, to enjoy what the King has prepared. Now, not only later, right now. That's the good news of the gospel, by the way. Is there an end to this whole story of humanity? Yes and amen. So do we suffer until then? A little bit, yeah. So what's the good news? we can experience the whole deal right now. That's it. All right. Verse 11. But when the king came in to look at the guests, and this is the odd part of the story, where we feel uneasy. The king started going around to look at the guests. He saw there a man who had no wedding garment. Uh-oh. But wait. Let me get you guys through my whole thinking process when I'm reading. They picked up... Are you guys with me with the cereals comparison? Just think of a bus right outside right now. Dave driving the bus out to cereals. Starting where I sit, right down at airport. And just putting inside, what was the criteria by the king? Anybody who has a face, basically, right? That's the criteria. If you see a face, they're good. Just toss them in. So you pick up everybody, Dave, and bring them in here. Did Jesus talk about like dressing them, giving them food? Nothing, but it just jumps. Isn't that weird? It jumps into the situation now where who is the person who provided everything in the story? The king. So you assume that the king is even providing what? The wardrobe for everybody. So the fascinating thing, it's all right, Jeremiah, just leave it there. You're good. Poor girl. It's all good. So, the temptation in this story, an old temptation, is to say, oh, this is a problem right here. Because yes, we are to invite everybody, but you have to figure out the dress, you got to do stuff, or else the king is going to look and say, oh, my friend, it's not good. No wedding garment, you haven't done enough. How many have heard this story like this before? I have for sure, many times. It seems like a great story, right? There's going to be a party. It's going to be good. Everybody's invited. And then you're like, this is great. And then God shows up and says, oh, you're not wearing the right clothes. And listen to what it says next. And he said to him, friend, how did you get in here without a wedding garment? And he was speechless. Verse 13, then the king said to his attendants, bind him hand and foot and cast him into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth, for many are called, but few are chosen. There you go. That's where that part comes from. So are you guys feeling the uneasiness of all this? We felt it before. I have growing up, listening to many preachers, including my dad, although I don't remember my dad telling this story like in a negative way. So you're off the hook, Dad. Watching on YouTube there. Isn't this story weird, though? Because you have a good sense that, yes, this is my deal, right? Everybody's invited. And then in the end, the king is looking, well, but you haven't. So what's happening in this story? Yeah, I mean, this is the hard part. Because in the background, I want you to think of, what does this community of the kingdom look like? What was the plan of God for the world? What is the gospel after all? How does it play out in our life? So let's try to revisit point by point the basic points of this story. How many times does the king send servants out? 3 times. Good. First time, they go out to who? The invited guests, right? Invited. And basically they ignore all of these guys that come on. Second time, they go to who? Same people. The invited again. And stuff gets violent, right? The invited again. And they not only ignore, but now they kill the servants, right? That's what happens. And then the third time, they go out to who? To all. Now, obviously, Jesus knows what he's doing. And we know what Jesus is doing with this story, right? This is, again, another illustration of what we've seen in the previous parables. This is the story of Israel in the Bible, right? How does it work? Well, God had a covenant. Haven't we been studying it for 13 weeks now? A relationship that he built with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, turned into the family of Israel. These were the primary guests that were called by God to participate in what who was doing? In what God was doing in the world. was not about Israel. It was about Israel participating in God, with God, and becoming a blessing to the world. So that the blessing of Abraham, I will bless you and you all nations. All nations will be blessed through you. So the whole thing wasn't about Israel. It was about Israel participating in what God was doing so that everybody in the world could join into that feast. That was the plan. And we know that when servants come up in these stories, these remind us of the prophets that God constantly sent to the elite, to those who had the law, to those who kept the law, who did all the things that were required. And by the way, we're say, well, they were legalists. They weren't legalists, my friends. Might have been, but law-keeping is not legalism. We already discussed this before. God spoke from a mountain, and He said, I want you to live kindly and in goodness and mercy and justice, and these are my words for you in order for that to happen. So law is grace. It's not like, this part here of the story, they needed to do things, and then here is grace. No, it's all grace. Everybody is invited to participate in what God is doing. Why was Israel special? Because from them, it was Abraham. The whole story was attached to them, the blessing to the world. But we know the story of the Old Testament, and we should not be judgmental on the Jews because remember, all of the lessons in these stories are right in front of us constantly. How the kingdom can be taken away from us and given to people who actually live like that, in goodness and in kindness and in mercy toward others. So this story is always close to us. It's never far away. So what happens in the story of the Old Testament, of Israel? God sends prophets to invite, saying, come back, return. Let's be together so that we can feast and invite others. What did they do? No, we're good. We're going to do some other things. We're worried about business. We're worried about other religions, idolatry, and everything else. So what did God do after He sent the first prophets? He said, okay, I give up. I'm just going to wrap things up and not have the party. No. The God of the Bible is the God of the party. It's a great image. Party will happen to the God of the Bible. So He sends more prophets. Because God, the story of the Bible, I've told you before, if you're going to sum up the whole thing, whole story, the whole book, whole story is about God going after humanity. That's it. God running after all of us constantly. That's what the story is about. So He sends more prophets. What did these prophets do, Justin? They carried, we spoke about this in Bible study Tuesday night, right? They carried in their bodies, not in their mind, in their bodies, a pain. Constant pain. Pain for what? Pain for communion. Because Israel didn't care about God, didn't care about mercy, kindness, and justice. So the prophets were these servants that were in between God and people saying, come to the party, my friend. This is not a horrible thing, it's a party. God is doing something and He wants you to participate. So they killed the prophets. So what does God do? Does God change His mind? No, party's still going to happen. That blessing to Abraham will reach all people. So what happens now? And then Matthew gives us a little window into what Jesus was about to do. We already know He was visiting foreigners, and from the genealogy, for those who are with us in Matthew chapter 1, from the beginning all the way till now, chapter 22, you guys remember that the whole thing was to bring everybody now to the party. That's the whole story. So now that's about to happen in Jesus. To the point, right, that Matthew gets very emphatic, saying, you know what? Let's just bring in everybody. And remember, he's writing this way later, when the church is already progressing, when the thing is happening and they have seen enough from the Spirit to know that the whole deal is not only about one ethnic group or one people, but about everybody else. So this story is not about, forget Jewish people, now it's the church. No, it's everybody participating through grace on what God is doing in the world. Now let me ask you a question though. If this story applies to us in any way, Are we sitting down here participating as a community in what God is doing in the world based on the first call? Yes or no? Were we there when Israel received the first call back in the day? Yes or no? No, that wasn't us. We weren't at Sinai, were we? No. Second call. Are you here because of the second call when God sends more prophets and they're killed? Were you there in those days? Yes or no? No. So why are you here? Isn't that an important reminder for us constantly? We are part of go to Cereals Road and bring anything in with a face. That's the gospel for you right there. What was the criteria? You have to keep the... Nope. Everybody, have a seat. And then watch what the Spirit can do in all of us as we participate in what God is doing in the world, here in a community and outside, when we go to the little corners of our life and continue bearing for others the fruit of what the Spirit is doing in our midst. If you're sitting down right now, it means that you responded to that third invitation, which wasn't even an invitation. It was just like dragging you into the bus and bringing you out, really. I don't know how you feel about this, but to me it's reassuring. And anybody who would be mad at this would be those who think they have some sort of upper hand in the whole situation. Or they have done, wait a minute, you didn't just go to Cereals and bring anybody in and allow them to participate in what God is doing. What about me? And you remember the son in the story of the the prodigal son, who said, I have worked for you. Anybody who's mad, or the parable of the workers, how come are you paying them the same amount of... Anybody who is mad at this are those who think that by doing stuff they're in a better standing than everybody else, when the whole story was about the everybody else and not just us. So that's the gospel story. God sends His servants, His disciples, His apostles. He sends the community now to do what? To invite. To invite to do what? Big word. We're studying it every Tuesday night in our Romans Bible study. Big word. Invite to do what? Participate. But what do? You do nothing, you eat. Dance a little bit when the music plays. And invite everybody else to look at the world through a different vision. I had this chat with Benjamin. I think I shared it on Tuesday night Bible study. After I stopped recording, I'll share it with you right now. We're driving around doing the food distribution the other day, and Benjamin's like, so what is your job? He asked me. What do you do? Because you're here, and then you go over there, and you talk and stuff. I said, well, and I was driving, so I said, for a second, let me try to explain to the kid what my job is. Very simply, I said, Benjamin, my job is to work in people's imaginations. That's it. That's what this whole thing is about. So what do you mean? I said, well, just look at that homeless guy right there. What do you see? And he said, that's a homeless guy. I said, correct. So my job is to teach people to look at Jesus and what He teaches, and then look at that same person and realize that it's not a homeless person, it's Jesus Himself. That's it. My job is to invite everybody to participate in what God is doing in the world and to see it for what it truly is. The terrain, a field where God is working and reconciling all things back to Him through Jesus right now, and not just, whenever. Right now. To participate right now. So what is the criteria? Bring them in. Whatever has a face can come in. That's good. So what do? You participate in what God is doing in the world. So what do I need to have? The only thing, what do you think the people on the main roads on Cereals had to get into the bus? What's the one thing that we do? So think of you, let's say that you're sitting on Cereals in Siler with a sign already you gave up because it's too hot. And you say, hey, come to the bus, I'll take you to a party to have some food. What does that individual need to get in the bus? One thing. I heard it. Willingness. That's it. Disposition. That's all we need. I need to be willing. Yes, I am willing to go. That's the one thing that God needs. The willingness to accept the invitation. For those of you who are sitting down and never accepted the invitation or never heard about it, friends, this is the gospel. What is the gospel? God is doing something in the world right now through Jesus, and you can participate in it right now. That's it. So when you feel sad and depressed, as I do, you don't trust. You honor those feelings by trusting that there is more, something beyond it, by looking to Jesus. For the troubles that we experience daily in our families, with our brothers, our sisters, our children, Dolores, we look at those things in a different hermeneutic because we participate in what God is doing in the world. So what does God require from us? To be willing, to walk into life, looking at it radically different. So what God requires from us is, yes, I want to go. That's it. I want to be part of what you are doing in the world. I want to participate in what you're doing in the world, and that's it. And then Jesus ends the whole story by saying, many are called, but few are chosen. You see, why is that so? Is because still we have this feeling that we need to do things. That whole thing, guys. Who do you think the guy that was speechless at the party, who do you think that is? Because I grew up listening to it like this, Dolores. Oh, this is a guy who was invited by grace, but then it seems like God is bipolar, right? It's like, oh, this was all too good because now you should have prepared. It's like, no. That makes no sense whatsoever. This whole thing is about grace and participating. So why was that man silent because he was not wearing wedding clothes? Because although he wanted to be part of the party, he wanted to go as a spectator. He wasn't willing to allow the king to do everything, because the whole thing is about grace. So to try to come into the thing by whatever standard you have, you'll never understand. You'll never participate because you feel like you have control, that you need to have some form of control, and that's what the people in Jerusalem wanted. We want to participate in what God is doing in the world, but we want to do it our way. So this is not about somebody who said, oh, I haven't given up cheese yet, so I can't participate. No, this is not about some legalist way to go into the party. It's all about grace, participating in what God is doing. And the hard thing here is not to give up chocolate, although it is for me. The hard thing is to allow God to do the work and you let go of the control of your religion. Of thinking that when you sin, I'm going to have to go back and read the entire lesson book now to make way for grace. You do nothing. The only thing that God requires is yes. Willingness to say yes. Are you guys with me? Yes or no? So that guy there, Gwen, is not somebody that said, yes, I want to be part of the church, and then you walk in and they give you a list of things to do and you say, oh, I cannot dress myself this way, so he's thrown into the darkness. People love to tell the story like that. I don't know why. Scary stuff. That guy, that person who was not wearing wedding gowns, wedding dress, wedding attire, why wasn't he? Because he was unwilling to allow God to do the entire work of grace, to participate in a party that is dictated by the rhythms of justice and mercy. That's what this whole thing is about. And it ends, Dolores, with the many are called, but few are chosen. And before we get into charts of predestination and all these other things, who are the chosen? The chosen are those who say yes. That's it. So many are called, few are chosen. Why? Because nobody wants to relinquish, Audie, their control over their own religion. That is the wide path, by the way. Total surrender. Let God do the work. Let God do the work, Dolores. When Jesus taught about the wide gate that leads to death, what do you think that is? We talked about it before. Every world religion, even Christianity, everybody walks through that wide door of what? Of me being in control of the whole deal. To let go of the control and allow the king to do the work. Nobody wants that. No, sir. I want to know that when I sin or do something stupid, that there's a way for me to pay for it. So that person in the party was not wearing gowns, not because he didn't let go of, red meat. He was there clothesless because he wanted to get into the party a different way. So, my dear friends, who is part of the community of the kingdom of heaven? Tell me. Everyone who says, yes, I'm willing. And by saying yes, they are dressed. And doesn't the Bible talk a lot about dressing? Dressed with mercy, forgiveness, kindness, grace. To live like that every day. It's a beautiful thing. That's the community of the kingdom. A community that is less recognized by signs outside of buildings and more recognized by the fruit that co-appear with the yes to the participation in what God is doing in the world. Right now, seeing the world, engaging in it, placing ourselves in it as if it is God's party, bringing all things together and celebrating life for the goodness of what life is. Thanks to that invitation that we did not deserve. That's it. How are you guys feeling? Are we okay? Do we understand the story? Yes or no? Yes. I'm glad. So do we say yes? Yes. Don't answer. Shh. In your heart. Have I ever said yes to that invitation, right? Have I ever said yes and said, I want to let go of everything I had control over and I want to participate in what you are doing in the world, not what I want the world to be doing, because that's the confusion these days. Specifically now in the Pride Month, right, when the world is celebrating their identities, their freedom to be who they want to be, and Christians are getting riled up. They're like, oh, you can't do that. No. Silence. Faith. To participate in what God is doing in the world and not throw people, push people out, but always be found in that path of the main road, inviting people in. With which criteria? Whatever has a face. So good luck with that. Why is it hard for us to get there? Because we do not want to relinquish control. We want to participate in what God is doing in the world and how we want God to be behaving in others. But I tell you, I spent a long portion of my life saying or being very confused about that invitation. When we say yes, we participate in what God is doing in the world, not in what we want the world to participate in, whatever criteria we have. Are we good? In your heart now, let's pray. Dear God, thank you for Jesus, who sort of recalibrates our thinking here. Many are called, but few are chosen, because few want to let go of business, want to let go of religion, want to let go of everything else to participate in the feast, in the celebration that you have prepared thanks to the Son. So, Lord, may you work in our community, in our heart as well. I do not know in this building how many people sitting down have actually said yes to that invitation. But may we be that community that responds, that is willing to say yes and participate in what you are doing in the world. To let go and to walk with Jesus through the narrow door that requires humility, but that leads to life. May we find that life now. May we participate now, I pray. In the name of Jesus. Amen.